So I had the chance to watch Avatar: Fire and Ash. I watched it in IMAX 3D, which is the way that I think anybody should watch this movie. I've made a couple of Avatar videos in the past, I think. Maybe one that stands out. But I love the Avatar films. I think they get a lot of hate and crapped on for no reason. People talk about how they don't have cultural impact, yet they make billions of dollars at the box office. So clearly the series has some sort of impact. Whether you want to say there's no meaningful impact or no sophisticated impact or whatever it is, but clearly there's something there that people love. I mean, I think another franchise that you can sort of swing the same critique over to is like the Fast and the Furious franchise, which to a certain point I think was emotionally resonant to people, especially with Paul Walker and everything. But once he passed and the subsequent movies, I think the series clearly degraded further. And then there's the Transformers movies, which they went on for way too long and didn't really have anything to say, really, I think. But people still went to go see it. Diminishing returns, obviously, with the more movies that came out. But Avatar, it doesn't have 5 movies right now. It's not a full, complete saga yet. But with this third one, I think it's safe to say that the series is still going to have quite a bit of success. And but I do think that artistically, I think out of the saga franchises, excluding maybe Harry Potter or something, I think Avatar has the most impact and the most sophistication to it. As weird as that may sound to a lot of cinephiles out there, but I love Avatar. Yes, it's a lot of things that we've seen before. Dances with Wolves, Pocahontas. You can say all you want. But guess what? Every story that's ever come out is also a rehash. The Lion King is Hamlet. Boo-hoo, right? But I love Avatar very, very much. And I think the biggest thing that the movie has, the first one came out, and that was a big success. A lot of it due to the 3D technology. And its story wasn't incredibly unique, but I think it did everything competently to the point where people were like, okay, this is something we should keep an eye on, And it is James Cameron, so he knows how to tell a story. Then I enjoyed Avatar fairly, it was great. I loved it. But then Avatar: Way of Water came out, and that one just completely blew my expectations out of the water, or my love for Avatar out of the water. All the puns intended. I think the biggest theme that movie had was family, right? And it really cemented the series as sort of this very family-friendly franchise, but it took itself a little bit more seriously than the typical family-friendly movie. I mean, there was, very dark themes in there. There was some cussing in there. It wasn't just this PG-13 happy-go-lucky movie, And obviously, from an action standpoint, a technical standpoint, it's a goddamn miracle. I mean, that film is incredible. So I love that film. That film made me cry. Okay, and I'm going to talk a little bit about The Way of Water, quite a bit actually, in talking about Fire and Ash. You can't really talk about Fire and Ash without talking about Way of Water. So, onto Fire and Ash. I was incredibly excited for this movie, and I came out of it mixed, which is very, very unfortunate. My girlfriend, on the other hand, she loved it. She thought it was a worthy sequel. She thought it was incredible. I don't know whether she prefers that one over The Way of Water, but I know that she thoroughly enjoyed Fire and Ash more than I did. Why did I not enjoy Fire and Ash? I don't know. Maybe I should talk about the positives. I guess that's what people do, right? They talk about the positives. I will be spoiling this movie. These will have spoilers. I just can't talk about these movies profoundly or with any sense of meaningfulness, if that's a word, without spoiling some stuff. And especially, of course, spoiling Avatar: Way of Water, spoiling the first Avatar. You know what I mean? So I guess I'll first start talking about the positives. And I will say, I don't hate this movie. I think this film is still fantastic. well, that might be a little bit of a stretch, but it is great. No, it's a good film. I don't know. It is a better than average film, and it is not a pile of trash. I'm mixed on it. That's the sort of interesting nature, is that there's a lot of things that I love about the film, but then there's a couple of things that I just have a lot of problems with, and it sort of ruins my complete and utter love for Fire and Ash. But I'll start with the positives. Obviously, I'll get it out of the way. The spectacle, the 3D effect, I think, is one of the best. I think the second film, I don't really remember too much the 3D effect in the second film. All I know is that I still loved it. Obviously, the 3D effect, I think, is necessary for the Avatar films. And what I mean by that is, like, yes, you can watch Avatar, on Disney Plus or buy it on physical media and still enjoy it fairly well. I watched The Way of Water before I watched Fire and Ash without 3D glasses, and I still loved the film. I thought it was incredible. So no, but what I mean is 3D is just such a staple to the series, and it's literally made with that in mind, that I just don't think you should go to the movies if you're not going to see it in 3D. Like, it's that simple. But Fire and Ash, 100%, the 3D effect just is absolutely incredible. I think it does it in more ways here than, like, the 3D effect is in use more in this movie than in the Way of Water or the original Avatar. There's shots where, like, the water is, like, right. It's like as if you were in the water. Like, the camera's right below the water, and it keeps going up and down, and there's people swimming and stuff like that. And and that's nothing new in 3D effect, but Avatar is really well known for that. Obviously, it started it with The Way of Water, but here in this third one, it is done a lot more. There's points where, like, leaves and stuff like that, people are flying through with their animals and these flying birds, and these leaves go up and go to your face and stuff like that. And it's just really, really good stuff. And there's some incredible shots, cinematography wise, in this movie. And The Way of Water had plenty of them too. But in this movie, there's these amazing, just wide, shots that are breathtaking, and they are enhanced with the 3D effect. And there's some incredibly close-up shots too, as well. Some profile shots of characters. And there's one shot in particular of Jake Sully. He is sort of in this very small, contained area, and he has, like, sort of these dreads to his character, and he's sort of depressed, and he's sort of doing this, like, just a very, like, depressed, like, and he's, like, sitting down, he's hunched over, like, but the camera is extremely close to his forehead and, like, his hair, and the lighting and Cameron really, really just decided to stay there for quite a bit of time, and the 3D effect makes that shot even better. I mean, it's just, his head just feels right there. It's amazing. It's fantastic. I think this one has some of the best cinematography of the series. If not neck and neck to Way of Water, or if not a little bit better. It is really good. There's some amazing shots with the villain. The villain of the film, I don't really remember her name, but she's really hot. There's that. But there's some great shots with Fire and Ash, and sort of creating these beautiful silhouettes with these ash people, with all this ash around them, and the fire and these sparks around them. It's very beautiful. It's great color. Just beautiful stuff. The action is impeccable. This movie has you at the edge of your seat all the time. I mean, just, my God. And with it being 3 hours, there's a lot of spectacle. There's a lot of action in the movie. It is just brilliant. It has you biting your nails. I think this one has you biting your nails way more than the second one. And that's because, and I guess this might allow us to transition into the negative part of the video, but or maybe it is a positive. This movie is incredibly depressing. This is sort of the you could say, if you want to look at these movies as, like, the life of Jesus, this is like the crucifixion, like it's almost that bad, to the point where you think these characters are like, my God, are they going to make it? Like, it's really down in the dumps. it's like that. And so with that comes a lot of action, right? And it's incredibly exhilarating. Cameron once again shows his expertise, in this genre, his proficiency in it. Really, he's just a master at it. Another, I guess, positive. The performances are fantastic. Sam Worthington's performance as the protagonist of the movie, and Zoe Saldana, and the kids, and Sigourney Weaver, and everybody. The villain's amazing. The villain's great. Two villains this time, of course. You have the Colonel, and then you have the Ash people leader, who's played by a female. I don't know her name, but she did a fantastic job. She was probably my favorite character in the movie. Moving on to the negatives or mixed area, right? Because this is an area where there's a lot of positives, but ultimately there's a couple things that just sort of ruin my full enjoyment of this film. And this has to do everything with the story. This film feels like a rehash of The Way of Water. The main story beats of The Way of Water have to do with Loak, who is Jake Sully's son, one of his sons. Obviously, his older son passed away in The Way of Water. The Way of Water, there was a tension between Loak's character and the family and this new water people that they're around in. Obviously, the Sullys had to move. They felt it was safer to run away for the safety of the forest people. They moved to a different area of Pandora with the water people to be able to keep their original family safe, or their forest people safe, do the right thing, but also, lose track of the humans and just, so they don't get targeted, right? And so with that came a lot of, they had to adapt and stuff like that. And that was all well and good. That's all well and good. Like I said, I love Way of Water. But a big point of the story in that movie was the tension between Jake Sully, and his son Loak. Loak, I'm not sure. I might get a lot of names wrong here. But he's sort of a rebel. He's always trying to be, he's the younger brother, so he's trying to have initiative, but that can often get him into a lot of trouble, and he ends up feeling, at the end of the day, he did something at the end of the movie that you could say arguably cost the life of his own brother, of his older brother. But he was disappointing his family plenty of times in that movie. And there's also the whale character that he befriends. And the whale also has its own parallel version of being an outcast and being sort of the black sheep and being the disappointing one. And that's what Loak is he's the disappointing child, right? The child that, in a way, Jake Sully kind of doesn't want. He always wants the older one to be the role model, but when the young one always tries to just sort of do his own thing and try to be the hero because he feels inadequate, right? Things end up happening. He gets into trouble, and you can say arguably he causes other things to get in trouble as well in the process. So that was sort of the story beat. But at the very end of that movie, some of the most heartfelt, just amazing storytelling, threads ever I experienced in The Way of Water. I mean, I just bawled at the end of that movie, and it was because Cameron did a perfect job in having all of these story threads. You have that character of Loak, you have the character, Sigourney Weaver's character, who is the daughter of the Sullys, but not really. I mean, she also has her own sort of journey, right, where she's just so connected to Awa, and she's sort of labeled as a freak by the water people, and even to a certain extent, her family loves her and everything, but they know that she's a little weird. Everybody does. And so, but she ends up saving the Sullys, and so did Loak, and it was absolutely beautiful. And Jake Sully and Natiri, they end up sort of realizing, my God, like, these kids are amazing. These kids are brilliant, and they saved us, And Jake Sully says this incredible thing to his son. He says, "I see you," which in the Avatar universe, that's sort of like saying, like, "I love you," just like tenfold. And that moment right there in that movie was absolutely incredible. It's really the pivotal moment for me, and it's why it's the ultimate emotional gut punch to me, is that moment in that movie. And so through all that, all that chaos and all of that sort of struggle and tension with all these outcast characters and the family, and at the very end, they sort of, they get saved. The Solis sort of save each other, and that feels resolved. And so you feel like we have sort of tied the bow to the tension that Loak's character had with his father, right? But then the third film happens, and the third film revisits and reopens the tension between Loak and his father. And I think that's the main thing that they sort of, they bring back the whales getting targeted and killed, which is fine. I don't necessarily have a huge problem with that. But the main story thing that they revisit is Loak and his father's tension. And this is the thing that really bothered me, because I just thought it was incredibly inconsistent. You have the end of Avatar: Way of Water, which is one of the greatest sequels ever. We already know how much burden sequels have in actually being great. And when that film succeeds in the way that it does, and it closes the way that it closes, even the way that it closed too is the family sort of going back to Awa, and connecting to Awa, and having their own little moment where they're able to see. Avatars have this thing, right, where they use their hair to connect to Awa, and they can sort of relive memories with their loved ones that have passed. And Jake relives a memory with his son, and with the older brother that died, and you feel like it's all good. And even Jake, right? He's like, I understand, we can't run away anymore. This is my fortress. That was his thread to be resolved in Way of Water, right? Because he was sort of having his family constantly run away, and try to avoid conflict. And at the end of the Way of Water, he has this opening eye moment again, which is cool. It's a cool parallel to the first movie, which is actually absent in this third one, which is interesting. But he has this moment where he grows as a character, and he goes like, not only, I thought so. I thought he was okay with his younger son now. He sees that his younger son is capable. He no longer has to feel like he can't trust his younger son anymore. That he understands his younger son and his rebellious nature, but how truly great he can be, and how he's not just a failure. But he grows as a character too, and he says, like, we're no longer going to run away. This is our home. We're going to defend it. We're going to do it. And I was like, okay. But in the third one, he also goes back to the thinking of like, no, I'm still not going to be the main leader guy. I still don't want to fight. Like, I still want to run away and stuff like that. And like, he's still doing the same thing in the third one. And along with that, and the relationship with his younger son, I'm just like, dude, like, that's the thing. When I started seeing all this unfold again, that's when I was like, okay, I see the criticisms of people, right? They're saying that this movie revisits the same things, that the Way of Water had. And I understood the criticisms at that point. I was like, I get it. I totally get it. And so for me, I'm very biased, of course. This is my personal opinion, right? So I'm very biased. The Way of Water just ended in such a beautiful, perfect note to me. When Jake said, "I see you," to his son, that was it for me, man. It was amazing. It truly was. It was a transcendental experience for me, the end of that movie, And then seeing Sigourney Weaver's character, Kiri, just bring the help of Awa to the family, which again, same thing happens in this film. The sort of Awa, ends up coming to the rescue thanks to Kiri. So there's that. But the Way of Water is brilliant, and so to see all these same story threads happen in the third one, it was a big disappointment. But now moving on to the mixed. This film, like I mentioned earlier in the video, is very, very depressing. I mean, Loak's character at some point is almost going to commit suicide. I mean, it's that dark, and I really appreciate that. And Neytiri's character, gets to the point where, like, my God, like, she has to, like, regain her ability to shoot a bow. Jake is constantly being thrown around to the point where he is, like, worthless as a hero. There's a lot of points in this film where I'm like, God, like, Cameron was really beating up these characters, and I really respect that. I love the point in a sequel or whatever, or a point in a movie where, like, you really beat down on your heroes to the point where you make the audience feel like there is no hope anymore. Like, that's great. And along with that is the film's themes on fire, destruction, anger, hate, and faithlessness. Losing hope, losing faith in Awa. That is the thing that I wish the movie focused on. But it does have that. This is a 3-hour-long movie, it has a lot of things going on, and that is one of the things going on in the movie, is the deconstruction of the faith in Awa, partly also due to the introduction of the Ash people. The Ash people, this is sort of told in one piece of dialogue, which I would have loved for it to be explored a little bit better. But the Ash people essentially say, the leader was like telling Colonel Quaritch, she's like, there was a volcano, there was a fire that ended up destroying our home, and many people died. And to me, that was a slap in the face. That was Awa's slap in the face to us, and Awa didn't help. In fact, Awa probably caused that, right? And so with that came their embrace of destruction and fire because of what happened to them, right? And that's awesome. That's always a very, very, what would you say? A very efficient, motivation for a villain, right? Is like, this happened to me, I have no hope, I have no faith, therefore the only thing I see is destruction. It makes perfect sense, right? And so with that, the film parallels that to what happens to our main characters and to all the good characters. It gets to the point where, like, Jake is, like, fully captured, and, like, the press and the humans, like, have him, and you're like, my God, like, it's almost over, like, like Jake and his family, like, it's all done, and the villains have won, like, it feels like that, and a lot of things, happen, right, and a lot of bad things, and all those things really, really push the themes of fire and destruction and hate that the Ash people have, and so, and that was one thing that some people have mentioned, like, oh, I wish we had more of the Ash people. I wish they would have been more the focus of the movie. And to a certain extent, I feel that too. But I think people they're not understanding that Cameron, what he was doing was, yes, you introduce the Ash people, but their themes and what they represent permeate throughout the movie, even when they're not on screen, with Jake almost getting to the point where he's going to kill Spider, this human avatar hybrid that he becomes in Fire and Ash. And Neytiri was like, we have to kill him because he's Quaritch's son, and he's always going to come back for us because of this boy. And Jake was like, no, but then eventually he almost succumbed to that. He almost was going to kill him. And so there's a lot of hate, and Neytiri hating on the humans, and sort of her and Jake fighting with each other, with Jake being like, do you hate humans so much? Do you hate me? Because I'm basically human too, And the movie really, really deals and just nips at the bud, I guess, of these really ugly things that we can all that we all. These really ugly things that these characters think, it's a very, very, introspective film, a film that really, really just goes to the core of the ugliest parts of ourselves, of the ugliest parts of Jake, the ugliest parts of Neytiri, and it highlights them, and it pushes them out, it shows them in full focus. and these characters end up becoming better because of it, right? Because they fully confront the demons that they have been repressing inside. Jake has been repressing his grief over the loss of his son, with Loak, and he's making Loak feel like crap the entire movie because he still has this repression to him, right? And he doesn't know how to deal with grief, and he likes to blame others instead of just like being like, this happened, just owning up to it, right? Facing it with real sophistication, and so everybody is just shitting on everybody, and being super down, and it's just it deals with it just really confronts the ugly parts of these characters, and I love that about it. Like I love that so much about it, and all of that is very much in line with the Ash people. The Ash people are just, it's fire, it's destruction, it's not growth, it's not rejoicing, it's not hope, it's not belief in Awa, it's the complete opposite. And again, Awa here, the deconstruction of Awa and the belief in Awa, even to the point where Loak and Jake are like, what does praying do? It doesn't do anything, And that's another thing, too, that I really like about this film is that this film is, like, unapologetically Christian. Like, totally, dude. And this is why a lot of people love it. It's family-oriented, and it has this sort of Christian base to it in the sense of, like, keeping the faith, But this one is that point where the Christians, right, were like, they start doubting God. Like, this is how real this movie gets in that way, right? And so I just wish that would have been the central focus of the story, where all these characters, Jake and his son they're together, they're fine, they're not having tension anymore, but all these bad things are happening to them and they start losing faith. That's what I wish they would have just kind of honed in on instead of continuing this tension between his son, these things that I thought were already resolved. Jake's sort of cowardly nature, for lack of a better term, into just like confronting the problem head on, and instead of running away, or not focusing on the home and the fortress that you have now, and he's always focusing on just like, and he's too harsh, and he's too rigid, and I just thought, he would have had those threads resolved. Maybe there's a story where these characters could deal with completely different threads, introduce new things, introduce new challenges and emotional challenges that these characters could face, right? There's always that. But that didn't happen. A lot of the same things were retread. So that was infuriating to me. One thing I also did want to say is, and I've already said this, but I love the Ash people a lot. And I think they sort of, their introduction, once we saw the trailers of them and what they represented, people were sort of likening them to the Fire Nation from the Avatar: The Last Airbender franchise, where they, like everything changed, when the Fire Nation attacked. And that, there's a lot of that spirit in this movie. The first opening sort of action sequence that was absolutely incredible and it was exhilarating was the Ash people. They arrive. They sort of just come in, and every time the Ash people come, it's a very, very like intentional. Like it feels like the movie is actively saying, they're coming. This is a problem. The characters themselves, like they're like, oh my God, it's the Ash people. Like it's like that, It's like the Fire Nation's coming. It's like that, and there's always beautiful shots of them whenever they appear because they have a very striking physical aesthetic to them, and even the animals that they ride are just different. They're painted differently. It's awesome. Another thing too is the eclipse happening in this movie. Same thing with The Way of Water. Same thing, the eclipse. And in this third one, the eclipse is happening, but like right as like the sun is like setting, like the Ash people come or something, or they come like right as like the sun just looks like the most beautiful. Like it's just something. The image of the Ash people just like riding on their like on these animals, like on these flying animals, with the backdrop of this eclipse is just like some of the most gorgeous like sci-fi shit I've seen. Like it's great stuff. So I love them, and whenever they entered, it was awesome. The music was awesome whenever they entered. It's great stuff, and I thought their lore is fascinating. Like the way they deal with they're savage. I mean, they truly are. They're like embracing in fire. They're like they have this little campfire, and they're like jumping over the fire. They're cutting off the braids of the avatars, which is like cutting off like the heart of an avatar. Like it's awesome stuff, dude. It's great stuff. So I love that. Now let's talk about the wild card. My wild card in this review is I'm going to extend an olive branch to the maybe few people out there, or a lot of people. I don't know. I suspect a lot of people are going to enjoy this film. I think a lot of the critics are the ones that are like, it's the same shit as the Way of Water, and it's not as good, and it seems like a carbon copy of the Way of Water. Like I know there's going to be a lot of that. I get it, and there's also a lot of other film critics that are like going to be even more negative towards this film just because they think it's just soap opera slop and it's just not good. Those people I think don't even have a point, okay, at all. I truly don't. But to sort of extend that olive branch, I think, and this came a lot with talking to my girlfriend about it, because she thought the film did work. And she brought up great points in the sense of these struggles that these characters go through, all these emotional and challenges, these threads that they go through, they're very similar to the Way of Water. That was the point. And that Cameron was being very brave in sort of tackling the same issues in this third one. Because at its core, Avatar has always been about the human experience, right? Or the flaws in us, And Avatar, like, even though it portrayed, at least in the first one, it portrayed the humans as perfect, or it portrayed the humans as villains, and it portrayed the avatars, I guess you could say, as perfect, as having everything, they have all their shit together. That's not true. We see their flaws starting in the Way of Water, and we really see their flaws starting here with Fire and Ash. And my girlfriend was making the point, like, this movie is just an extension of the flaws of these characters, and it's really, really taking their prejudices to the task. It's putting them front and center to the point where they hate themselves. And that's also the themes of the Ash people, right? It's negativity, and insecurity and faithlessness and all of that. And so the extension of the themes of the Way of Water just goes to show, and it makes the series much more human, and it makes Fire and Ash much more about the human experience, and it makes it much more about the flaws by doubling down on these threads that I thought were resolved in the Way of Water. Because that's what humans do. We fall in the same hole over and over and over again, even though we say, I see you. Even though we say, I believe in AWA, or even though we have faith in each other, we always stumble and fall over and over again. We're hypocrites. We contradict ourselves. And so her point is like, no, on the contrary, I think it makes the film and it makes this franchise much more human by doubling down on these things in Fire and Ash, right? Even though we thought they were resolved in the Way of Water. And she thought it was very brave. I think it was very brave. One side of my brain says it's brave in a dumb way, and then the other side of my brain thinks it's brave in a smart way. So it's very, very interesting. And I think when I talked to her about it, I was like, I feel like I want to revisit this film. I'm probably going to watch it again at some point, but I definitely want to revisit this film once the fourth and fifth films come out. If they do, I think James Cameron is like starting to say he might move on. I don't know. Because this film does end sort of in a more resolute way than like any of the other films, I think. This might be the end. Who knows? Although Quaritch very well might still be alive, and the leader of the Ash people is definitely still alive. But I would be interested to go back to this film to see the whole franchise, the whole saga, completely. That I think that's the biggest thing. And so for me, I'm very, very critical, when I look at individual pieces, when things are coming out just one by one, I'm very, very critical. But once I see the full picture, I can tend to ease my criticisms a little bit more. But nonetheless, I do think my girlfriend was making really, really interesting points to the point where, and she's very, very honest. I mean, she could watch a movie and then just like hate on it, or love it. And she's changed my mind on things before. So Joker 2, famously, she loved that movie first before I did. So, it might take some time for me to understand. I also think I'm not, she said like I'm not a bookworm, and like I think that's a big thing. Sagas and multiple parts and multiple movies in like a franchise, I'm always a little bit more cautiously optimistic about. I love like single stories. I love very, very like just solitary, one movie. Like I love solitary stories. The moment you start going into sequels and stuff like that, I just start getting scared because it's just very easy to mess things up, as we all know, right? However, lately I've been incredibly wrong about that. A Quiet Place, the sequel to A Quiet Place, was awesome. Joker 2, I think in many ways is better than the first one. You can make a point and say that the second one is better than the first one. Like, great stuff here. And of course, we still do have our bad sequels, here and there. But this movie, and Way of Water was fantastic. It was better than the first one for me. So that's why the Fire and Ash definitely disappoints me a little bit more, and I'm a little bit more hurt by it. But I think, and I don't know, I think these unresolved threads, or these threads that are visited again, it just reminds me of like soap opera writing, and it reminds me of like TV show writing. And, I go to movies to watch things be resolved and to idolize characters. I go to movies to look up to characters. Like, I understand there's going to be flaws in characters. I understand that that's the whole point of tension and drama. Like, that's what makes things watchable and enjoyable. But I would like our characters to learn things and to overcome these things that they deal with. And if you're going to basically show them dealing with it and resolving these issues in one movie that's 3 hours long, but then do the same thing in the third one that's also 3 hours long, to me it was just like come on. But I get it. The human experience is not black and white. The human experience is incredibly bumpy, and we go through the same things, even though we claim that we already have our shit together. But we very well could stumble in the same places that we stumbled before. So I get that. So with that, I think ultimately my reaction to this film is that it's mixed. That's how I feel right now. I might end up loving the film a year from now. I might end up being like, what, I get it. Who knows? But those are my thoughts on Avatar, Fire and Ash. I would like to know what you have to say in the comment section below. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Give this video a like if you like, dislike it if you didn't, subscribe to the channel if you enjoy this content, you want to see more stuff like this. Did you enjoy Avatar, Fire and Ash? Is there anything that you agree with me on, disagree with me, whatever it is? I want to have a constructive discussion down in the comment section. If it's your birthday, happy birthday to you, you beautiful creature. But I think that's it for me. You all take care, stay safe, and until next time, I love you.